She was the joke of the academy, until her bare hands split the training deck in two HFY Sci-Fi. Best Zara Keen stood at the edge of the academy's training field, watching the other cadets line up for their morning exercises. She was just like them, yet completely different. While most of her peers stood tall and proud, their bodies enhanced by cybernetics or genetic modifications, Zara remained the same as the day she had entered the academy. A regular human girl, no fancy enhancements, no incredible abilities. Just determination, and maybe a little too much hope. The sun above the training ground shone brightly on the towering structures of the academy, each one a symbol of the incredible power that was housed within its walls. Zara had always dreamed of joining the elite warriors trained here, a group of soldiers who went on missions that shaped the fate of entire galaxies. But since the moment she had arrived, she felt out of place. The other cadets whispered behind her back, laughing at her lack of enhancements. She had heard it all before. Human with no mods. She'll be lucky if she lasts a month. Bet she doesn't even know how to lift a standard-issue blaster. Zara gritted her teeth every time she heard their mocking words, but she didn't let them show how much they hurt. She knew, deep down, they were right. She had nothing extraordinary to offer. Her first training session had been a disaster. She couldn't keep up with the alien cadets who were naturally stronger, faster, and more skilled. The cybernetically enhanced cadets laughed when she stumbled during basic agility drills. The only thing she could do was push herself harder than the others, but no matter how hard she tried, it wasn't enough. Zara's failures weren't confined to physical training. When it came to combat simulations, she was always outclassed. She'd watch in awe as the others easily defeated their opponents, their movements fluid and precise. She, on the other hand, struggled to even hit the target. Her instructor, a tall, silver-skinned alien named Instructor Takar, would often sigh in frustration after watching her attempt. "Zara, you're going to have to do better than this if you ever want to survive in the field. No one will take you seriously with this level of performance." Her heart sank with every word. She was trying her best, but she could never match the effortless power of her peers. Despite this, she refused to give up. Every night after the others went to bed, Zara would sneak back into the training rooms. She would run through drills alone, practicing her form, testing her limits. But no matter how many times she repeated them, it felt like she wasn't improving. As she stood there now watching her fellow cadets move into formation, she could feel the weight of their eyes on her. They looked at her with pity as though she were a lost cause, but Zara wouldn't let that stop her. She wasn't going to quit. Not yet, not ever. Zara Keen. Front and center, the voice of General Trixar echoed across the field, cutting through the murmurs of the cadets. Zara quickly straightened up and walked forward, feeling the eyes of everyone on her. She knew what was coming. General Trixar was a towering alien, covered in scales that shimmered like polished metal. His eyes, dark and calculating, swept over the cadets, pausing for a moment on Zara before he turned to face the rest of them. "Today, we are testing your combat readiness. The Academy will select the best of you to join an elite squadron. You will face real threats, real enemies, and you will be expected to perform with skill and precision." He paused for dramatic effect, his gaze sweeping over the group again. "Some of you are already ready for that. Some of you still have a long way to go. For those who have not yet proven themselves, today will be your final test. Fail, and you are out of this academy." Zara's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. This was her chance. If she could somehow pass this test, she might finally prove to everyone, and to herself, that she belonged here. But deep down, she couldn't shake the fear that she wasn't enough, that no matter how hard she tried, she would never be able to match up to the others. "Zara Keen," General Trixar called, his voice cold and indifferent. "You will participate in the first combat drill. We'll see how you measure up against your peers." Zara took a deep breath and nodded. It was now or never. She followed the rest of the cadets into the simulated combat area, her legs feeling heavier with each step. The atmosphere inside the simulation chamber was tense. Holographic enemies were set up in various formations, ready to attack at any moment. Zara looked around at the other cadets, who were already preparing their weapons and positioning themselves with precision. Her eyes fell on Rylak, the alien cadet who was known for his incredible strength. He was already towering above the others, his muscles bulging beneath his combat suit. Zara knew he was going to be a serious challenge. She would be lucky to even make it through the first wave without being taken down. The countdown began and Zara's heart raced. 3, 2, 1, begin! Immediately, the simulation came to life. Holographic enemies began to charge at the cadets from all directions. Zara fumbled for her blaster, her hands shaking. She fired a few shots, but they missed wide. Her heart sank as she heard the distant sound of her peers effortlessly taking down their targets. She tried again, but this time her weapon jammed. A cold sweat broke out across her brow. "Pathetic!" a voice yelled from behind her. It was Voss, a cadet with cybernetic arms. He was firing rapidly at enemies, effortlessly taking them out. "You're going to get us all killed!" Zara tried to ignore his taunt, but it stung. She focused on the task at hand, determined not to let them see how weak she felt. She crouched low, trying to find an advantage, but it was no use. Every time she aimed at a target, another cadet would take it out before she could even get a shot off. Her movements felt sluggish, and her aim was off. The battle continued, and Zara found herself falling further behind. Her energy was waning, her mind fogging with doubt. She wasn't cut out for this. She wasn't strong enough, fast enough, smart enough. She had been fooling herself, thinking she could ever be like them. Suddenly, an explosion shook the field. A group of holographic enemies appeared from behind, ambushing Zara. She had no time to react. Her blaster malfunctioned again, and she was trapped. But then something inside her snapped. A deep, primal instinct that had been dormant surged to the surface. Zara's body felt lighter, her senses sharper. Without thinking, she threw herself into the fray, dodging and weaving with movements she didn't even know she could make. She fought with everything she had, her mind focused only on survival. She managed to take down one enemy with a well-placed shot, then another. Her heart pounded in her chest, the adrenaline surging through her veins. She wasn't just reacting anymore, she was in control. For the first time, she felt like she belonged here, but the battle wasn't over yet. Zara was far from ready to face the final test. She knew that today would be the most important day of her life, and somehow she had to find a way to prove herself. She wasn't going to let this chance slip away. Zara woke up early the next morning, long before the other cadets had stirred. The academy's sprawling campus was still quiet, with the soft hum of the training facilities filling the air. She always preferred the calm before the chaos, a time when she could collect her thoughts and mentally prepare for the day ahead. But this morning was different. Her hands were shaking as she tied her boots, and her mind raced with doubts. Yesterday's training had been a disaster, and it weighed heavily on her. For the first time in a long while, Zara wasn't sure if she was going to make it through this academy, but quitting wasn't an option. She had come too far to give up now. The sun hadn't fully risen yet when she walked to the training ground. It was cold, but that didn't bother her. What bothered her was the thought of facing the others again. She knew what they thought of her. She had seen the looks, the whispers. They didn't believe she belonged here. They didn't believe humans could ever compete with their kind. Zara couldn't blame them. She had failed them, failed herself. But she couldn't just fade away. She had to prove them wrong. When she arrived at the training area, the other cadets were already there, stretching and preparing for the morning drills. Zara's eyes found Rilak right away, the alien who was always the center of attention. His muscles were like towers, each movement fluid and confident. He was everything Zara wasn't, strong, fast, and unshakable. But she wasn't about to let that stop her. She had learned long ago that strength wasn't just about muscles. It was about heart, and she had plenty of that. General Trixar stood at the front, his eyes scanning the cadets with a critical gaze. He was always calm, always calculating. Zara had seen him judge countless others, but today it felt like his eyes were trained on her. Her stomach churned with nerves, but she stood tall, pushing the fear down. "Cadets," General Trixar's voice boomed across the field. "Today we begin the next phase of your training. You will face one of the most difficult simulations you've ever encountered. It will test your strength, your endurance, and your ability to think on your feet. Do not take this lightly." Zara's heart raced. She had heard stories about this simulation. It was designed to break even the most powerful cadets. If you couldn't handle it, you were out. There was no second chance. "We will divide you into pairs," General Trixar continued, "and you will fight through a series of combat scenarios. Work together and you may survive. Fail and you will be eliminated." The other cadets didn't seem worried. They were used to this. But Zara's palms were slick with sweat. She knew she had to pull herself together or she would fail. And if she failed, there was no coming back from it. The general stepped forward, holding a small device in his hand. One by one, he called out the pairs for the simulation. Zara stood quietly, waiting her turn, her heart pounding. Her breath was shallow as she tried to steady herself. When her name was finally called, she felt a chill run down her spine. Zara Keen and Voss. Zara froze for a moment. Voss was one of the most formidable cadets in the academy. He was part human, part machine, with cybernetic arms that could crush steel. He had never been anything but confident in his abilities. And Zara had never even been able to land a solid hit in their practice sessions. This was her chance to prove herself, but the pressure was unbearable. As they walked to the starting position, Voss didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on the holographic battlefield ahead, his mind focused entirely on the task. Zara tried not to let the doubt creep into her mind. She couldn't afford to show weakness now. The simulation began with a loud alarm, signaling the start of the first wave. The air shifted, and the battlefield around them came to life. Holographic enemies, an army of robotic soldiers, materialized in front of them. They were fast, relentless, and programmed to attack without hesitation. Voss immediately rushed forward, firing his blaster with deadly accuracy. Zara hesitated for a split second, unsure of what to do. She couldn't keep up with him. She couldn't match his speed or strength, but she had to try. She had no choice. Taking a deep breath, she unslung her own weapon and joined him in the attack. The first few enemies were easy enough to dodge, but soon they were surrounded. Zara felt a pang of panic in her chest as the robots closed in. She fired her blaster, but missed. She fired again, but the shot was weak, barely grazing the enemy. Voss was already moving ahead, cutting through the robots with ease. Zara's breath was ragged now. She could feel the sweat running down her face, her arms trembling from exhaustion. Why wasn't she better at this? Why couldn't she just be like the others? Her mind screamed at her to run, to give up, but she couldn't. She couldn't let the others see her fail again. Then, out of nowhere, a robot lunged at her from the side. It was too fast for her to react in time. Zara barely managed to raise her weapon before the robot knocked it out of her hands. She stumbled backward, heart racing, but before she could fall, Voss was there. With a single swipe of his cybernetic arm, he destroyed the robot in an instant. "Stay close," he grunted, his voice cold. He didn't look at her, didn't give her any kind of encouragement, but Zara took a steadying breath and nodded. She couldn't let him down, not now. The simulation dragged on, and Zara found herself slipping further behind. Every time she tried to take the lead, she was overwhelmed. The robots were relentless, and Voss moved with the speed and precision that Zara could never match. She kept pushing herself, kept trying to find a way to contribute, but the harder she fought, the more she felt like a burden. Finally, the last wave of enemies approached. Zara could barely stand, her legs shaking from exhaustion. The robots were bigger, stronger, and faster than ever before. She knew this was the final test. If she couldn't hold her ground now, she would fail. Voss was already charging forward, his blaster firing nonstop. But this time, something inside Zara snapped. She couldn't let him do it all. She couldn't be the one who held him back. With a burst of energy, Zara charged forward, ignoring the pain in her legs. The first robot came at her, its glowing eyes narrowing. Without thinking, Zara grabbed the robot by the arm. The force of her grip sent a shockwave through the air. She didn't know how she did it, but the robot's arm broke off in her hand. She threw it aside and faced the next one. Voss stopped, his eyes wide with surprise. Zara was fighting like a different person, her movements quicker, sharper. For the first time, she felt like she was in control. The robots fell around her, one by one, as she worked with a precision she had never known she had. By the time the last enemy was destroyed, Zara was breathing heavily, her body sore but victorious. Voss stood beside her, his face unreadable. For the first time since she had entered the academy, Zara felt a sense of pride. "You didn't do too bad," Voss said, his voice surprisingly neutral. "But don't get cocky. This was just the first test." Zara nodded, her mind spinning. She had done it. She had finally proven that she belonged here, but she knew this was only the beginning. The real challenges were still ahead, and she wasn't about to stop now. She had more to prove, not just to the academy, but to herself. Zara woke up earlier than usual the next morning. The exhaustion from the previous day's training still weighed heavily on her body, but she couldn't let that slow her down. Today would be another test, another chance to prove herself. The early morning air was cool, and the academy grounds were peaceful, yet she could already feel the tension in the air. Every cadet seemed to know that something big was coming, something that would push them all to their limits. She walked through the empty halls of the barracks, her footsteps echoing in the silence. There was no one else awake at this hour, and for a brief moment, Zara allowed herself to feel calm. She thought about the previous day's simulation. She had done well, better than she had ever hoped, but the praise from Voss hadn't been what she had expected. His words were brief, distant. "You didn't do too bad." She had expected more. After all, she had just fought her way through an impossible simulation, overcoming her doubts and weaknesses. But instead of feeling proud, she felt empty. She knew Voss didn't believe in her, no one did, but something inside her refused to give up. She had learned something about herself during that simulation. There was more to her than anyone realized. As she entered the main training hall, the usual group of cadets was already there, preparing for the day's lessons. Zara tried to ignore the whispering and laughter from the others. She had learned to tune them out. But today, she couldn't help but notice the way they looked at her. She had gone from the joke of the academy to someone who had finally earned their respect. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with jealousy. Zara didn't mind. In fact, it made her feel stronger. She was no longer invisible. The door to the arena slid open, and General Trixar's booming voice filled the room. "Cadets, gather round." His voice was always commanding, never soft. The cadets lined up, Zara included. As she stood among them, she could feel the weight of the general's gaze on her. He had noticed her progress. He had seen what she was capable of. But he didn't speak to her directly. He never did. Instead, he addressed the entire group. "Today will be different. Today you will face the greatest challenge yet. We are taking you beyond the academy walls to the simulation facility deep within the mountains. The environment is harsh, the conditions are extreme. Only those who truly have the strength to survive will make it through." The other cadets didn't seem fazed. They had all trained in difficult environments before. But Zara's heart began to race. The mountains were infamous. There were stories of cadets who had entered the facility and never returned. This wasn't just another simulation. It was real. The group boarded the transport ship that would take them to the training facility. As they traveled, the silence among the cadets was deafening. Zara sat alone, her mind swirling with thoughts of what lay ahead. She felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. Was she ready for this? Could she really survive in a place like that? The transport ship descended toward the mountainous region, its engines roaring as it cut through the atmosphere. The moment they touched down, the cadets were herded off the ship and into a massive hangar. It was cold and dark, and the air smelled of metal and machinery. General Trixar stood waiting for them, his stern expression never wavering. "Welcome to the testing grounds," he said. "Here you will be tested in ways you cannot even imagine. Your strength, your endurance, and your ability to think on your feet will be pushed to their limits. There are no easy ways out, no shortcuts. Fail, and you will be sent home." Zara's stomach twisted with nerves. She had come this far, but the reality of what she was facing hit her all at once. She wasn't just up against her peers anymore. She was up against nature, against a place designed to break even the strongest of warriors. The mountains would show no mercy. The first test began immediately. As the cadets were led out into the freezing cold, Zara could feel the harsh wind biting at her skin. It wasn't just the temperature that made the air feel so sharp. It was the weight of the challenge they were facing. They were being dropped into the wilderness with only their training and their instincts to guide them. The terrain was rocky and uneven, with towering cliffs and deep ravines. Zara could hear the sounds of the others moving around her, but the landscape was vast and silent. It felt like they were in a different world, one where survival wasn't guaranteed. The cadets were given a simple task: to navigate through the treacherous terrain and reach the objective point on the other side of the mountains. It seemed straightforward enough, but Zara knew it would be anything but easy. She had heard stories of cadets getting lost, of broken limbs, of battles with wild creatures that roamed the mountains. This wasn't just a test of skill. It was a test of everything they had learned up until now. Voss immediately took the lead, his massive frame cutting through the snow as he moved with precision. Zara followed at a distance, doing her best to keep up. She wasn't as fast as the others, but she had learned to be resourceful. She used her surroundings to her advantage, climbing rocks and crossing narrow bridges to stay on course. But the further they went, the more difficult the terrain became. The wind picked up, howling through the narrow gaps between the cliffs, and Zara had to fight to keep her footing. Hours passed, and the temperature continued to drop. Zara's fingers were numb, and her breath came in ragged gasps. She had never experienced anything like this before. It was one thing to train in the safety of the academy, but out here, every step felt like a battle. The others had already begun to fall behind, their movements slowing as the cold seeped into their bones. Zara knew she couldn't afford to stop. As the sun began to set, the sky darkened and the temperature dropped even further. Zara's body was shaking from the cold and her energy was running low. She had to make it. She couldn't go back now. Ahead of her, she saw Voss and Rylak, who had formed a group to help navigate the terrain. They were close to the objective point, but Zara could see the exhaustion in their faces. They were pushing themselves to the limit, just like she was. And for the first time, Zara realized something. She wasn't the only one struggling. Everyone here, even the strongest cadets, was facing the same challenge. Zara pushed forward, her legs burning as she climbed the last ridge. Her fingers were frozen and her vision was blurred from the cold, but she refused to stop. The objective point was just ahead. She could see the faint glow of the signal marker in the distance. All she had to do was reach it. Just as she was about to take her final step, her foot slipped on the icy rock beneath her. She lost her balance and fell, tumbling down the slope. For a moment she felt the world spin around her, the sharp rocks cutting into her skin as she rolled. When she finally stopped, her body was bruised and battered and she couldn't catch her breath. But then she heard something, a voice. It was Voss. He had come back for her. "You're not alone," he said, his voice rough from the cold. With his help, Zara stood up and pushed forward. Together, they reached the objective point. They weren't the first ones there, but they had made it. General Trixar was waiting for them, his eyes scanning the group. "You all passed the first test," he said. "But this is just the beginning. The true challenge lies ahead." Zara was exhausted, her body aching from the cold and the climb, but she had done it. She had made it through the first trial. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the weakest cadet. She had earned her place here, and now nothing would stop her. The cold mountain air burned in Zara's lungs as she took slow, measured steps, her body aching from the brutal climb. The previous night had been one of the most difficult experiences of her life, but it had been only the beginning. Today, General Trixar had announced that the cadets would face an even tougher challenge. After surviving the first trial of navigating the harsh terrain, they were now headed into the heart of the mountain, where the real tests awaited them. Zara didn't know what to expect, but she could feel the unease in the air. The cadets around her seemed just as tense, their faces grim and their bodies moving more slowly than before. Zara glanced at the others. Voss and Rylak were both ahead of her, focused on their task, but there was something different in their expressions. Even they were beginning to show signs of exhaustion. The constant cold, the grueling climbs, and the mental strain were taking their toll on everyone. But Zara couldn't afford to slow down. She had come this far. She had proven that she could handle herself, but she wasn't about to stop now. Her muscles ached, and her hands were stiff from the cold, but she kept moving, one step at a time. Every part of her body screamed for rest, but she ignored it. She had to keep going. She had to push through the pain. General Trixar had told them that the next trial would test their ability to endure. The objective this time was not just about surviving. It was about overcoming fear, weakness, and the desire to give up. They were entering a series of caves deep within the mountains, a place where the temperature dropped even further, and the environment grew more dangerous with each passing step. Inside the caves, there were no safe zones. The path was treacherous, filled with pitfalls, and every corner held an unknown danger. Zara had heard rumors about the cave system, strange creatures, deadly traps, and unpredictable conditions. It wasn't just the cold they had to worry about now. It was everything. As they entered the cave system, the air grew even colder, and the shadows swallowed the light from their flashlights. The walls of the cave were rough, jagged, and damp with the constant chill. The sound of dripping water echoed through the passageways, and the deeper they went, the more eerie the silence became. It was a silence that felt alive, like something was watching them, waiting for them to slip up. General Trixar led the way, his footsteps sure and steady. He didn't seem to be affected by the cold, his body moving with practiced ease. The cadets followed closely behind, Zara among them. She felt the weight of the darkness pressing in on her as they descended deeper into the caves. The path soon became narrow, forcing the group to move single file. Zara's breath came in short bursts, the air feeling thin and cold in her lungs. The ground beneath her feet was uneven, and every step seemed to bring her closer to the edge of a deep, dark chasm. Her nerves were on edge, her senses heightened, but there was nowhere to go but forward. Hours passed, and the further they went, the more the air seemed to press against them. The cold wasn't just a physical sensation now. It was a presence, a weight that sank into Zara's bones, numbing her body and mind. She tried to shake off the creeping sense of fear that was slowly creeping into her thoughts, but it was difficult. The darkness was oppressive, and every step felt like a struggle. But then something changed. Zara noticed that the others were slowing down. Rylak, usually the strongest, was now stumbling. His steps were heavy, his face pale from exhaustion. Voss was still moving, but his movements were slower, more deliberate. Zara realized that everyone, no matter how strong, was beginning to feel the effects of the harsh conditions. It wasn't just physical exhaustion anymore. It was mental. They were all on the edge of breaking. Zara felt the pull of doubt begin to creep in, but she pushed it aside. She couldn't afford to give in. She had to keep moving, no matter how much her body screamed for rest. Ahead of them, General Trixar paused, his sharp eyes scanning the path ahead. "We're almost there," he said, his voice as cold and commanding as ever. "But the real test is just beginning. You will each be separated and face your own trials. You will be tested not just by the environment, but by your own mind. The path ahead is filled with obstacles that will challenge your willpower, your instincts, and your ability to stay calm in the face of fear." The cadets exchanged uneasy glances. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. She had come this far, but what if she wasn't strong enough to face whatever lay ahead? The fear was real, a cold, gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach, but she pushed it away. She had to keep going. General Trixar stepped forward and activated a panel in the wall, revealing a hidden passage. The walls of the cave parted to reveal a vast underground chamber. The floor was covered in a strange, slippery substance, and the air felt thicker, heavier, as though something was pressing down on them from above. "You will enter this chamber alone," General Trixar instructed. "Each of you will face a challenge designed specifically for you. You must overcome it, or you will fail." Zara felt her heart race as she stepped forward, the cold air biting at her skin. She didn't know what awaited her in the chamber, but she knew it would be difficult. It had to be. The entire trial had been designed to break them down. She stepped into the chamber, the doors closing behind her with a heavy thud. The room was dark, except for a faint, flickering light in the center. As Zara moved closer, the light revealed an image, a figure standing in the middle of the room. Zara froze, her breath catching in her throat. The figure was a woman, tall and imposing, with eyes that glowed with a strange, unnatural light. She was surrounded by shadows, her face hidden in the darkness. Zara's heart raced, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. The figure looked familiar, but at the same time completely alien. The woman spoke in a voice that seemed to echo in Zara's mind. "You think you are strong, human, but you are nothing. You will never be enough to survive in this world. You will always be weak, always be inferior." Zara's heart pounded in her chest. The words hit her like a physical blow, and for a moment she felt herself faltering. She had heard these words before, heard the doubt, the mockery, the whispers. They had always been there in the back of her mind, telling her that she wasn't enough. But this time was different. Zara stood tall, her breath steadying as she faced the woman in the shadows. "I am enough," she said, her voice steady, strong. "I am more than you think." The figure laughed, a sound that sent chills down Zara's spine. "You are nothing," the woman said, stepping closer. "You are weak, you are alone, you will never survive." But Zara didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her body moving with a confidence she had never felt before. The woman's words didn't have power over her anymore. She wasn't weak. She wasn't alone. She was Zara Keen, and she had survived worse than this. She had faced fear before, and she had beaten it. She could do it again. With a sudden burst of energy, Zara lunged forward, her hands striking the figure with a force she didn't know she had. The woman recoiled, her form flickering, disappearing into the shadows. The light around Zara grew brighter, and the chamber seemed to open up around her. She had won. She had faced her fear and conquered it. As Zara stepped out of the chamber, the others were waiting for her. They looked at her with a mix of surprise and admiration. She had passed the trial. She had proven herself. And as she looked around at her fellow cadets, Zara realized something. She was no longer the joke of the academy. She was someone they would have to reckon with. And this was just the beginning. The final day of the trials had arrived. Zara could feel the weight of the entire academy bearing down on her as she stood with the other cadets in the cold, empty courtyard. The sky was overcast, the clouds hanging low in the sky, casting a dark shadow over the training grounds. The air was thick with tension. Everyone knew this was it. Today would decide who was worthy of moving on and who would be sent home in disgrace. The cadets had already gone through so much. The harsh climbs through the mountains, the terrifying challenges in the caves, the constant fight against exhaustion, hunger, and fear. But none of it had been as difficult as what awaited them now. This final test wasn't just about strength or speed or intelligence. It was about heart. It was about proving that you had what it took to survive and thrive in a world that never gave you a break. Zara stood at the back of the group, her mind racing. She had made it this far, but could she really make it to the end? She had doubted herself before. She had been the weakest, the one everyone overlooked. But now, after everything she had gone through, she knew she wasn't the same person she had been when she first arrived at the academy. She was stronger, smarter, and more determined. She wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting to show the others that she was worthy of being here. As General Trixar approached, his footsteps echoing across the courtyard, the cadets straightened up. His expression was as stern as always, but Zara could see a flicker of something else in his eyes: respect. He had seen her growth, had watched her struggle and overcome obstacle after obstacle. She had proven herself in ways no one had expected. "Cadets," he began, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "You have all shown remarkable skill and determination in the trials. But the final test is unlike anything you've faced before. You will be tested in combat, not against each other, but against the world itself." A murmur went through the group. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. The world, what did that mean? Was this some kind of final all-out battle? Trixar continued. "Each of you will be dropped into a simulation based on real-world conditions. You will face a variety of threats: wild creatures, hostile forces, and environmental hazards. You will need to survive, adapt, and complete your mission in the allotted time. Fail, and you will be eliminated from the academy." Zara's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. The final test. It wasn't just about physical endurance anymore. It was about everything she had learned, every lesson she had struggled to understand. It was about her will to fight, her ability to think on her feet, and most importantly, her ability to stay calm under pressure. The cadets were quickly led to the transport ships, and Zara found herself sitting alone. She felt the same familiar nerves rising in her chest, but this time she didn't let them control her. She had faced fear before, and she had survived. She wasn't going to let it stop her now. The journey to the simulation site felt long, though it was only a few hours. When the ship finally landed, Zara was immediately struck by the landscape. It was a vast, desolate planet with jagged mountains and dark, swirling clouds overhead. The air was thick with a strange, metallic taste, and the ground was uneven and cracked. This place felt wrong. It felt like it was waiting for something dangerous. Zara stepped off the transport and immediately felt the weight of the place on her shoulders. The other cadets spread out, each of them heading toward their assigned mission points. Zara stood still for a moment, taking it all in. There was no turning back now. She had come this far, and she was determined to see this through to the end. Her mission was clear: find the enemy base hidden somewhere in the mountains, disable their communications, and escape. It sounded simple enough, but she knew it wouldn't be. This planet was hostile, and every step she took could lead to danger. As she began her journey through the rough terrain, Zara kept her eyes open for anything that could be a threat. She knew that the simulation would throw everything it could at her, and she had to be prepared. The wind howled around her, carrying with it the sound of distant roars and strange, unsettling noises. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle of leaves seemed like a threat. Hours passed as Zara moved through the mountains, her body sore and her mind alert. She had seen a few wild creatures, large reptilian beasts that seemed to stalk her from the distance, but they had kept their distance. Zara knew better than to engage unless absolutely necessary. She couldn't afford to waste energy fighting unless it was unavoidable. As she climbed higher into the mountains, she found herself in a narrow canyon, the walls rising steeply on either side. The air was thinner here and it was harder to breathe. She pushed on, determined to reach the enemy base before time ran out. But as she turned a corner, she froze. In front of her, blocking the path, was a massive creature, a hulking beast with 6 legs, covered in scales that shimmered like metal. Its eyes glowed an eerie red, and its mouth was filled with rows of sharp teeth. Zara could hear it growling, its massive form looming over her. It was unlike anything she had seen before, and for a moment, fear surged through her. But then, something clicked inside Zara. She had faced creatures like this before in the mountains, in the caves. She had been scared then, but she had survived. And now she wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to let fear control her. Zara gripped her blaster tightly, her hands steady as she raised it to aim. The creature charged, its massive claws digging into the ground as it leapt toward her. Zara fired, hitting it square in the chest. The creature roared in pain but didn't stop. It lunged again, and this time Zara was ready. She dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding its claws, and fired once more. This time the creature collapsed, its body twitching before it went still. Zara let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her heart was racing, but she didn't stop to rest. She had a mission to complete, and the clock was ticking. She moved on, quickly but carefully, keeping her senses sharp. She knew that this was just the beginning. As she neared the enemy base, the environment grew more hostile. The terrain became more treacherous, with narrow cliffs and deep ravines. Zara had to climb, jump, and navigate through a maze of obstacles. The pressure was building, but she refused to let it overwhelm her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zara reached the enemy base. It was hidden deep within a canyon, surrounded by high walls and guarded by automated drones. She crouched low, watching the drones as they patrolled the area. She had to be smart. She couldn't just rush in, she had to plan. Zara waited for the right moment, then sprinted to the base, using the cover of the canyon walls to stay hidden. She reached the entrance and quickly disabled the security systems, slipping inside undetected. Once inside, she found the communication room and began working to disable the enemy's network. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion, but she kept her focus. She couldn't afford to make a mistake now. With a final press of a button, the system went dark. The enemy's communications were disabled. Zara had completed the mission, but now she had to escape. The countdown was running out and the base would be self-destructing soon. She raced back through the base, moving as quickly as she could. The drones had noticed the breach and they were closing in on her. Zara didn't look back. She couldn't. She had to make it out. Just as the base's alarms blared, Zara made it to the exit, diving out just as the structure behind her exploded in a burst of light and fire. She landed on the rocky ground, rolling to absorb the impact, before scrambling to her feet and looking up at the transport ship waiting for her. She had made it. She had survived. And as she climbed aboard the ship, the doors closing behind her, Zara felt a sense of pride like never before. She had done it. She had proven that she was more than just a joke. She was a warrior.